WOVU LP, Cleveland.
This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Rising, Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning is Branson Wright. He's a filmmaker. He has quite a storied career. We're going to talk about a documentary that he did called King of the Block. And we're also going to talk about his history as a person in media here in Cleveland, Ohio. Glad that he's still here. He could be so many other places in the world, but right now he's in Cleveland. Welcome to Open Door, Branson.
Vince, thank you for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. I'm glad to be able to have this conversation with you. It's one that I've wanted to have for quite some time. And, you know, I just happened to see you at the opening ceremonies for the Greater Cleveland Urban Film Festival. And so here we are. So first of all, you have done a film called King of the Block. Let's talk about that film, and then we'll jump into your history here in Cleveland.
Okay. Vince, I grew up in Cincinnati, and being from wherever hometown you're from, you like to brag about where you're from. You're proud of where you're from. And prior to graduating from the University of Cincinnati, I attended West Virginia University. And being away from home, and as I said, everyone bragging about where they're from, what's good about your hometown. And one of the things I used to talk about is the high school football, in particular, Moeller High School, which was coached by Jerry Faust, who went to Notre Dame and University of Akron, and Princeton High School, which became a big rival of Moeller. And back in those days, it seems now that everybody goes to the playoffs in high school football. But back then, it was only so many schools could go. And what would happen in Cincinnati, Moeller and Princeton would usually play the last regular season game. And then the very next week, they'd play again. So the first game was just as big as the playoff game, because it would determine who would be the number one seed in the playoffs. And it just became a big rival. So I would brag about that, you know, as a college student in West Virginia. And as the years went by and I fast forward became a filmmaker, it was a film I always wanted to do. So I got the opportunity last year with it being released a couple months ago and doing the King of the Block.
Okay, so I got to hit you with this, man, because you probably
hit me.
You probably don't know this about me, but I actually went to Massillon, Washington High School.
Okay.
Now, Massillon, Washington High School is one of those schools that was a perennial state power, and it seemed as though every year, or, you know, when we got to the playoffs, we always ended up playing Princeton or Moeller. Massillon is the high school birthplace of football. It was born there, and the oldest high school football rivalry is between Massillon Washington High School and Canton McKinley High School. So the next documentary that you do.
Well, Vince, let me say, unfortunately, for my sake, there's been several documentaries done on Massillon and Canton. And most recently, it's when I found out that the Canton McKinley Massillon game is the only high school game that Vegas puts on the books.
Okay.
Didn't know that till I saw the most recent documentary. So absolutely, it's storied career, both schools, storied history, I should say, for both schools, and certainly more than one documentary can be done on that rivalry and all of the excellent coaches and players that came out of it. And it's still a game that where I haven't attended, that I want to be there. I want to see that game because of that great history.
Yes, I've had occasion to go down there a few times for the Canton-McKinley game, But the thing about Massillon is somehow every year they come up short. They get to the playoffs, they beat McKinley, and then a Cincinnati team will take them out of the championship. It's been a bit disappointing, but hey, I think we've won 24 state championships, so I'm not going to cry about Massillon being a loser because they've been consistently a winning football team. There's so much that we could say about that, but I'm glad to hear that there have been documentaries, and I'm not surprised about that. So with that being said, and you've got this one under your belt, what's your next project?
Well, I have a lot of things in the can, and as I've learned in the business, the next one is the one that's going to be paid for. The next one is the one that you raise money to do. There's so many documentaries that I would like to do, and I have talked to people about those, but I can't tell you what those are now.
Okay.
But I'm indeed working on getting the next project going.
Okay. So let's talk about King of the Block. You've been able to see it successfully through its completion, and you're getting it screened in different places. It's not going to be in GCUF for reasons that you explained to me the other day. But tell us about this documentary. What was it like for you to get it done, and what did it take to get it done?
Well, it's fortunately it's my fifth or sixth documentary, and I say fortunate because was able to, from experience, to get through some of the hurdles that may have hindered me in the past, but because of the experience of doing the others, was able to maneuver through it, and that goes from the research on both schools. A lot I knew. But being a good reporter or a good filmmaker, you want to do as much research as you can because of, things will come up that you didn't know about or didn't know a lot about or didn't know what you thought you knew. So research on the two schools was very important, which we did. And the type of interviews that we were able to acquire. As I said earlier, Jerry Faust from Notre Dame and Akron, he began his career at Moeller, and we were able to talk to Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel, Youngstown State, Ohio State, and Jim Tressel was important because of the players from each schools that he recruited when he was a college coach. We talked to Tony Hunter, who was a first-round pick out of Moeller. A really good player, and we talked to Mark Brooks, who's just had his state record broken in terms of high school touchdowns in a state finals game. We talked to Dwayne Hunter, who went to Princeton, had a fabulous career at Princeton, played at University of Cincinnati. Then we talked to a guy named, I don't know if you've heard of him, Pete Rose. You ever heard of Pete Rose?
Pete who?
Yeah, Pete Rose. He didn't go to either school, but Pete, an icon at Cincinnati, and he went to Western Hills High School. But it was good to talk to Pete about Cincinnati and about high school football and sports and how important it is there. So we had a range of people that we spoke with, and even Kurt Herbstreit. Kurt Herbstreit went to Centerville, but he was quite familiar with the rivalry, and he, in fact, he played against Princeton when he was in high school, and he said his victory over Princeton helped him get recruited to Ohio State. So it was the research. Did plenty of research to come up with quite a few people we wanted to interview, and it was one thing about being a former reporter is research is all part of the game. And I was happy that my training at the Plain Dealer and the other papers I worked for helped that transition.
Yes. And we're going to talk about your time at the Plain Dealer. I want to talk to you about what it was like for you to reach out to people like Jerry Faust and Jim Tressel and others and get a yes from them.
What was it like to do that?
Yeah.
Well, the one thing about being a reporter that the years that I was, and I don't want to say was because I guess once a reporter, always a reporter. But it was the relationships I had developed as a newspaper guy. I met Faust on several occasions, not only from growing up in Cincinnati, but when he was a college coach. The same with Herb Street. I had never met Herb Street, but we know a lot of the same people and talked about the importance of, or the importance that I felt for the documentary. And I think it helped from some of the other films that I've done in the past, like Women of Troy, which is on HBO, and being a co-producer of Believeland, which was 30 for ESPN. So having that resume that helped as far as calling someone and asking them to be in your project, and then they can look you up and see that you do have some background in what you're doing.
Well, it helps to have IMDb credibility, and obviously you did, and so, but having that reporter's background and the connections that you had was surely a boost for you when it came to, approaching those folks, and then having the history of having done those other films was probably great too. This is quite interesting, Branson. We're going to talk more about your involvement in filmmaking and also talk about your life as a reporter when we return. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is filmmaker Branson Wright. We'll be right back.
She's having fun. She says you don't want to be like me. Don't want to see. Yeah, no offense, but what were we just listening to?
Oh, just something my previous writer wanted to hear. Want something else?
Yeah, actually, for sure. Can you switch that station to 95.9 FM, please?
Yeah, for sure. What kind of station is this?
What? You're not hip to 95.9 FM, BBC Community Radio? They have so many good shows. Whether it's a talk show, music show, it's so much good information on this station.
Yeah, I'll have to keep the dial right here then, since I drive so many different walks of life every day.
I literally listen every day and find out something new. Whether it's something for myself, my community, or just something special that's going on in the city.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep it locked right here on WOVU 95.9 FM.
Good, because I'm sure you and all your other writers would love this station just as much as I do.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is Branson Wright, a filmmaker who worked for 20 years at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He went on to start doing films. He's now a filmmaker, and he has just created a film called King of the Block, and it is a documentary about two storied high school football teams with a rivalry that goes back several years. Welcome back to the show. You talked in our last segment about the connections that you had as a reporter. I was curious about what it was like for you to make a transition from being a journalist into being a filmmaker. How did that happen for you?
Well, probably, I covered the Cleveland Cavaliers as one of the beats over the 20 years that I covered for the Plain Dealer. And probably in I think it was 2006, 2007, there was a story that I came across, and actually I knew about it. And it was a player out of Dayton, Ohio, a former high school All-American out of Dayton, Ohio, by the name of Dwight Anderson. And I had known about Dwight, from growing up in Cincinnati, about how great of a player he was. And just through the years, I had always wanted to write a story about Dwight, but the thing about Dwight, when you talk to anybody from Dayton or anyone that had seen him play, they're so descriptive about his skills. I mean, anybody whose nickname was the Blur, you can't get any more descriptive than that. So I always thought, I said, you know what? I don't think a story would do this justice. I think it needs to be a documentary. And at the time, I had no idea how to do a documentary. I did know how to research because of my reporter as a background and in my background, and the fact that either if you're doing film or you're doing music or you're doing writing, you're a storyteller. So I knew as a storyteller that I wanted to tell this story. So I basically just got some help. I knew a guy that had a camera, he could shoot. I knew a guy that could do some editing, and we just got started. I told him this is the story I wanted to do. This guy, high school All-American, went on to University of Kentucky. Before this, during this huge game against Kentucky and Notre Dame on national TV, he had such a fabulous game that the announcer said a star was born. And he went from there, he transferred to USC. He got hooked on drugs. This is when the crack epidemic came about, late 70s, early 80s. And he got strung out on drugs, but he still got drafted into the NBA. It didn't last long. He played overseas, played minor league basketball, became homeless. In fact, when I found him and interviewed him, he was homeless. Fortunately, from doing this story, we were able to get Dwight to John Lucas in Houston. And, John Lucas has a facility to help people from recovering from substance abuse. So we sent him to Houston with a one-way ticket, and he was able to recover. And by the time he came back, the film was done, and we were able to use the film as a vehicle for him to speak to kids and speak to different people all over the Midwest. So during that time, I said, you know what? I think this is what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker. And as we started to hear murmurings around the plain dealer that people were going to get laid off and that how the newspaper industry was shifting, at the same time, I was still writing, but I was still submerged into becoming a filmmaker. And then when they laid most of us off during the pandemic, I was already a filmmaker. And if it wasn't for thinking about trying to present Dwight Anderson other than writing, I probably would have been, I don't want to say in a bad position, but I wouldn't have been a filmmaker as quickly as I have become now.
Yes. That's interesting. I have to ask this question in light of the fact that you mentioned how basically you rescued the brother. He was homeless, and then you did a documentary about his life. How is he doing now?
Unfortunately, Dwight passed away from COVID in 2020. Yeah, and during 20, he passed away. And by no means do I take credit for getting him rescued, because there were others that were encouraging me for the story. Cedric Tony, he played with the Cavs for a moment. He's from Dayton, Ohio. He knew Dwight's story. He was very encouraging of getting Dwight to John Lucas's facility. And I have to give kudos to Isaiah Thomas, because the one thing about this facility, it's not free. Someone has to pay for it. And Isaiah Thomas paid for it, which I'm still so honored that he felt it in his heart to do that. So no, I don't take all the credit for Dwight becoming sober, but as I said, you can't do anything alone. It takes a group, it takes help, and certainly Dwight got help from quite a few people.
Yeah, well, Branson, that's really amazing that all of those things could happen the way that they happened. And, you know, I heard you when you said, basically, how could you tell a story about somebody named The Blur without showing them? I mean, it's one thing to conceptualize that, but to actually see somebody with that level of talent. So kudos to you for that. And you know, it's just kind of synchronicity, I suppose, that was your genesis as a filmmaker. I would be remiss if I didn't have the conversation about you with you about the change in the paradigm of the newspaper industry. You know, I like you was involved in media a long time ago. I went to Kent State University, but you know, I took a few journalism classes and I worked as a radio news reporter for several years here in Cleveland, Kent, and Akron. And I've noticed how things have changed in the radio industry, and we've seen things change in the newsprint industry as well. The internet has a lot to do with that, but I'm just wondering what it was like for you to be in that industry and see those changes coming about and be so affected by it that you ultimately had to change your career.
Well, as I said, the fact that, you know, not doing anything alone and having mentors with vision, one of them being Justice Hill, former professor at Ohio University, former sports editor at several newspapers, and he freelances right now for Cleveland.com. And Justice had told me years prior to us getting laid off about learning how to shoot and edit video. And I'm looking at him like he's crazy. Like, dude, they hire people to do that. You know, I'm a writer. And he said, no, you need to learn how to do this because this is how things are going. So the fact that I learned that, and I don't consider myself an expert videographer or even editor, but having those skills not only helped when I was at the Plain Dealer, but it also helped me as far as vision. I visualize things in a different way now because I've used the lens. So the preparation and then being fortunate to have those friends and mentors to help see, you know, they saw the light, what was about to change, and fortunately for me, I listened.
Yes. Well, you know, the same thing kind of occurred in radio and television, because there was a time when you would see a reporter go out and they'd have a camera person with them. Now you'll see a reporter come out and they're using the camera and they shoot the footage, they conduct the interview, and then they go back to the station and they put the entire package together, and that's what ends up on the air. I'm sure the unions aren't crazy about that, but it's just part of the change. And then the other thing is, you know, what came out of this thing that we're calling the pandemic right now. You know, so many people acquired new sets of skills for their toolbox and have gone on to much bigger and better things as a result of that paradigm change. So we could effectively say that the same thing happened to you.
Yes. And I would just say the only difference, well, a couple things. You know, one, I probably prepared a lot earlier, as I said, because of the vision, you know, that some of my mentors and friends had. And the thing for me, the pandemic just sort of kicked me in the butt as far as, hey, this is what you want to do. You prayed and said you wanted to be a filmmaker. Well, there's no excuses. The Plain Dealer lets you go. And now this is the path that you want to take. So that's the path I'm on.
Yes. Well, those kinds of situations, they can be really painful, but sometimes they're necessary just to propel you to a different place. You know, I worked in radio for a total of 8 years as a news reporter, and I had 4 jobs, and I lost 3 of them. One of them I walked away from because I just needed to move on to a full-time opportunity. But the thing about it was I had to shift gears, you know, and I had to accept the fact that, you know, it was kind of was kind of a situation where you just didn't have any control of what was going to happen. You just had to accept those things and just move forward. And that's what I did. So 4 jobs in radio, fired 3 times, and then having to go on to accept employment in something outside of what I really wanted to do, but that's life. So that happened to you in a certain way, and then you end up going into making films and doing all of these documentaries. I want to talk to you about the financial aspect of it, because I know, as a reporter, you were probably making pretty good money at the Plain Dealer, and then that situation changed, and you're now looking at a place where you have to be financially self-sufficient based on your own productivity. We'll dive a little bit into that when we come back. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM, Burton Bell Car Community Radio. We'll be right back.
Are you or someone you know in need of help? Here's a resource you can turn to.
The Thea Bowman Center has been serving the community for over 50 years and provides services to help support Mount Pleasant and surrounding communities of all ages. Some of these programs include adult education like GED, computer classes, food pantry, senior outreach, youth after school, and summer programs, and much more. Are you a Cleveland resident in need of a GED preparation, a food pantry, youth or senior programs? Then call the Thea Bowman Center at 216-491-0669 or visit TheaBowmanCenter.org. Call the Thea Bowman Center at 216-491-0669 or visit TheaBowmanCenter.org to register today.
This message is brought to you by the Thea Bowman Center and WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Car community radio station.
WOVU listeners, did you know you can call us during any live show? Did you know you can ask questions or give your comments live on the air? If you didn't know, now you know. Call the WOVU request line at 216-271-0959. Your voice is our request. No one says it like you. You're better than the rest. Call us 216-271-0959. Questions, comments, complaints. We want all that and the kitchen sink. This is WOVU. Our voices united. We can't do it without you. Call on through. Hi, this is Wanda Harris from Warrensville Heights, Ohio, and you're listening to the best radio station in Cleveland, WOVU 95.9 FM, Burton Bell Car Community Radio.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is filmmaker Branson Wright. We just talked about making the transition from being a journalist, reporter, sports reporter, into becoming a filmmaker and dealing with the financial change that happened as a result of that. Talk about how that happened for you and how it has worked out.
As far as the financial state that I'm in now, well, the one I do miss a regular check that the Plain Dealer provided for my services. I certainly miss that. So one thing about being a filmmaker, you need to be creative because of the income change. Fortunately for me, I'm able to write, and I freelance for ESPN's Anscape. So I'm able to do stories there, and that brings some steady income in. And as far as the films, you do what you can until your films get to a certain spot where you can make money off streaming, or in terms of with HBO and ESPN where they pay you for the film. So far I've been nothing but blessed. I don't have the regular paycheck, but I'm still able to take care of myself and my family, and I'm just so appreciative that I'm able to do that.
Okay. And you've dealt with some personal challenges in terms of health. Can you talk about how things have improved for you?
Oh, the only thing for help for me is, man, I tore my quad tendon doing a great duty. I was turning in some. I think it was 2019. I was turning in some clothes to one of those volunteer baskets or whatever, and there was some black ice there that I didn't see, and I did the James Brown, and it wasn't pretty, and I mean the James Brown mashed potatoes, and my quad tendon above my knee was like and I tore it, and I was laid up, man, for a while, so I was able to recover from that, man, and I you know, again, I'm just happy that we have good medical facilities here in Cleveland, and I listened to my doctors and really crushed that rehab and got back on my feet. Literally got back on my feet.
So this happened when?
Oh, this was 2019 when it's out.
Okay. The reason that it kind of struck me is because I have a friend who just recently slipped on some ice and he ended up cracking a couple of ribs, and he was so incapacitated that he couldn't actually walk. I mean, he was just basically stuck at home for a long time, but thankfully he's recovered and he's able to get back into enjoying the game that he loves so much, golf, and life goes back to normal. But it's just the timing of those kinds of things, you know, and everything is just going so well, and then boom, something like that happens, and then you have to deal with it. So, you know.
Yes, they say life happens.
Yeah.
Life happens.
It happens. Yes. Yep. So all these documentaries that you have done, are there any that stand out for you as your favorite projects?
I would say they're all my favorite, and they all had different meanings to me. The Blur, the one on Dwight Anderson, that was the first one. That's the one that got me started, and it was a story that I had wanted to do for years, and was able to do that. The thing, and probably the second one is for sure The Women of Troy. Again, it was a project I had been wanting to do for years, and it took 10 years to get it made. From the time that I called Cheryl Miller and said to Cheryl Miller, "Hey, Cheryl, I don't know how this is going to get done, but I'd like to do a documentary on the USC women's basketball team." And Cheryl giving me her blessing, and for the next 9 years, doing everything I could as far as putting the right people together and shopping to different networks, getting turned down by quite a few networks, to finally HBO saying, yes, let's do this. And going out to LA, sitting in that gym and bringing a lot of those women in there to interview for this piece was just an awesome feeling. And what really made it an awesome feeling is how appreciative that they were. The fact that they was such a remarkable team and such remarkable women, and with USC having one of the best film schools in the world, and the fact that no one from USC had attempted to do this story, one, that amazed me, and two, it just made me wonder. It was just such a great team and such great women. I was shocked that it had never been done, but fortunately for me and the gentleman I worked with, we were able to bring it to life.
Yeah, that's interesting, you know, because right now you're speaking to the power of the narrative. And as consumers of, I guess, visual and oral information, we have so many choices that we can make. I mean, you know, when you turn on a TV set and you're looking at Amazon Prime, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of films that you can choose. But the documentaries, they're true to life. They have information in them that is edifying and has an ability to change someone's life. It's just amazing to me that, you know, you're in a position to create this content. How do you drive people towards being able to see your films?
Well, to go to my website, BransonWrightFilms.com. And from there, I'll have news when there's a film out or where you can see it. Definitely my website, and go to my Twitter at Branson Wright.
Okay.
And I certainly appreciate you letting me let everyone know how to contact.
Yeah, I'm glad to do that for you. And, you know, as you mentioned it, I'm really interested in seeing the films just because you've done them and because I know you. I will also say that, you know, what you're sharing with me is kind of inspirational because, you know, I have a few documentaries in me as well, having gathered so much video and photographic content. There are just so many possibilities. So I thank you for this conversation because I'm looking forward to perhaps creating a few documentaries of my own, maybe not on the level of Branson Wright, but, you know, there's nothing like getting it done and putting it out there, just like writing a book. By the way, is there a book in Branson Wright?
I wrote a book in the early 90s called Rookie Season on a minor league baseball team in their first season. I'm sure there's another book out there, but I've been so focused on films, I just haven't thought about it. But yeah, there's at least another book in there.
Yeah. Well, I would think that the Branson Wright life story might be an interesting book to go from being that kid in Cincinnati to being a student at West Virginia University and then going on to be involved in the world of sports and connecting with folks like Pete Rose and Jim Tressel and Jerry Faust. I mean, and Cheryl Miller. I mean, that's just phenomenal.
Well, besides you and my family, that's the only people that'll read my story. But thank you, though. Thank you.
You never know, Branson. Seriously, you never know, you know. And the thing about writing a book is that, yeah, you know, most of the people who get the book, they'll buy it from you just because you wrote it. But, you know, there's good stuff in your life story, and I'm thinking that it could be an inspiration to those who have an interest in the subjects of sports and filmmaking that might bring others to read that book. And if you need a ghostwriter, if you don't want to write it yourself, and I know I'm probably insulting a writer, but if you need a ghostwriter, I know a couple of people.
Okay. Well, when that time comes, when I hit the lotto to have something to write about, I'll call you.
All right. So you did mention your website. Is there any other social media stuff that you want to get out there?
No, my Twitter at Branson Wright and BransonWrightFilms.com. And hey, any of your listeners, they can email me, Branson at BransonWrightFilms.com. Okay. Send me an email. Any students out there, I'd love to talk to you. Any non-students out there, I'd love to talk to you too. Definitely connect with me. We can do something together, or just chop it up, or just have lunch.
All right. Sounds like a great invitation. And if anyone has any mental out there, they may want to take you up on that proposition. Branson Wright, it has been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Much success to you in your filmmaking career. And we certainly hope that King of the Block goes to the top. I'll be looking out for that film as well as the next one to come from you. Thanks for joining us on Open Door.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
All right. Open Door with Vince Robinson will be right back on 95.9 FM WOVU.
Wow, I wish there was a way I could listen to WOVU when I wasn't in the city.
But there is.
Really?
Yes. You can go to WOVU.org. Go to our webpage. It's got everything on all the shows.
Eric Nolan is in the building.
This is Rachel Hill, the host of Her in the Huddle.
This is Delvis Valentine.
All the listers.
Yo, what it do? It's your girl DJ Coco Z.
Hey, I am Talitha Kube from Let's Talk About It.
Hi, this is DJ Black Unicorn.
WOVU.org. Tap the app. Listen live.
This is WOVU 95.9 FM, Burton Bell Carr Community Radio.
Hi, this is Ken Hawkins.
Hi, this is Pinky.
This is TC Lewis.
This is Shantae Travers.
This is Reggie Hayman.
This is Bill Silverby Richards. If you're not listening to WOVU 95.9 FM, you're not in the mix. I'm Silverby. Crank it up.
24 hours of golden.
WOVU LP Cleveland.
Welcome back to Open Door. I have been joined by Janine King, a.k.a. Madam J. She and I go way, way, way back. I ain't going to tell you how long ago, but let's just say we met sometime during the last century at Kent State University. And I've been paying attention. You know, I kind of watched social media, and I saw her on, and she was doing something about children. She's an advocate for children, and she's sensitive to their issues and needs. So I thought we'd spend a few moments talking about that, but we're going to get reacquainted real quickly. How you been, first of all? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vince. I've been a mommy, and both of my boys are in college now. So as you just called me a perpetual mom, I'm always being mommy, so I've got to send boxes off, but I'm pretty good, like everybody else. I've had my ups and downs, and had some health issues and all of that. But God is good, and I'm still here.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'll just, in all transparency, say that I have some very fond memories of the time that we spent at Kent State University in our formative years, and it's just really amazing where things have gone since then. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that you have a very well-known brother, I believe, by the name of Terry King.
Yes, known as Psychotic Nut.
Yeah.
That's my brother.
He will never be able to live down that label.
No.
And it doesn't adequately describe him, just right. Based on the turn that his life took in terms of him being involved in health and awareness and metaphysics and all those kinds of things. So to think of him as a psychotic nut and know that he has all that knowledge is really kind of an irony, wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yes. Well, that was in the 80s.
Yes.
So was I supposed to say that?
Hey, it's going to get out sooner or later.
Sooner or later.
So you just shared with me that while we were at Kent, you were actually known as Madam J, and you were a disc jockey.
Yes. My freshman year, between going into my sophomore year, I stayed at Kent. And during that summer, I became a DJ on Kent State's FM, WKSR. And my name was Madam J. And I played jazz. And I did it for 2 summers, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I really enjoyed it. So I was talking to a friend of mine, Kevin Hockett. He saw my first platform on Facebook, and he said, Jay, I remember when you were Madam J on Kent State, and I would roll over in the middle of the night and hear your voice, and it's time for Madam J. He said, wow, it brings back memories. So I decided to pick that back up.
Okay. So as Madam J right now, you are doing, I guess, content. You're doing a program on Facebook. Tell us about the program and the subject matter that you're dealing with.
Well, it's I have a great love for children. I've always loved children. When I was a youngster, all my mother's friends and families was like, oh, she gonna be full of babies. She gonna have her first baby when she's 14. That girl can't stay away from kids. Well, they couldn't stay away from me either. I guess I carried it. So, my background is mental health and social work, but I had a daycare center for 12 years, called Precious Little People. It was over on Coit and Woodward, right across the street from the East Cleveland Farmers Market. So at the daycare center, excuse me, excuse me, and along with my background, I also have a master's in education and a bachelor's in criminal justice. So I just combined them two. But what eventually happened, when I was 7 years old, I told my mom I wanted a nursery school, they called them then. Unbeknownst to me, everything that I did from the time I graduated from high school up until the point where I purchased the daycare center, everything I did in between led me to that. So in the 12 years that I did the daycare center, I was also doing social work, mental health, case management, you name it all. So last year, I do a prayer line every day with my church at 12 o'clock. And we were talking about children and things that they were going through. And I just began to talk. And for about 20 minutes, I gave a plethora of information, like so much information. One of my sisters on the phone said, you should do a platform, Jay. People need to know the things that you know. People don't think about this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, all year, last year, the first of this year was like, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. So here I am. I'm just spilling bits and pieces and tidbits and information that some parents don't consider, others do. There's so much information and so many needs that our children have that you can't get it all from one place. So over my years, I've collected information based on my careers that I've had. I worked with Girl Scouts for 9 years, so go figure. I also was the one that did Girl Scouts in the juvenile at the detention center. Back in the day, I was on the Metro page. First big, huge picture of me doing Girl Scouts in the detention center. So I've just always, and I run into children now, and I'm giving information. I give them tidbits. I check them about covering it up. I check them about how they look. We talk about, little things. And what I've discovered is, first of all, our children are our children. Whether you birth them or not, they're still yours because of what's going through our veins, right? So I just look at it like we all need to pitch in and help to give our children the guidance, the support, the information, the direction that they need. I mean, you're one person, you could save or give 10 pieces of information to 10 children in one day. You'd be surprised. And you never know what children need. So you could be that person, then I come along and I give them something, and then someone else comes along, and then before you know it, you've developed the character of this youngster just by paying attention to them. We overlook them. And I named my daycare center, it was called Precious Little People. And that's because we overlook little people. We don't think that, we don't value them. We really don't, because we abuse them, we neglect them, we beat them, we post them, we traffic them, we pornographize them, we drug them, we do so many. So we don't really honor our children. And it was important to me that when I got my daycare center, that the name had a phenomenal meaning. And
yes, I'm so glad that you brought up that issue, because one of the things that children really do thrive on is being seen, being heard. I mean, how many times have you been out somewhere and you hear a child and the child is going, mommy, 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 and mom's attention is on something else. And it's like she's been able to tune out those cries for attention so effectively over a period of time that she may not recognize the fact that, that child wants to be recognized. And, they also want structure. They want someone to say, look, this is what you need to do, but we're in a place now where we're kind of afraid of our children for whatever reason. And at the same time, the children that are being born today, they're kind of like a different species. I mean, there's really something special about the children who are coming into the world these days, because they come in with so much insight and so much in them that we owe it to them to cultivate them properly so that they end up being effective as adults living in their purpose.
Absolutely, Vince. But I want to say this. It's still, I don't care what's going on in the world. It still starts at home. See, I was an old school mom. I came to the party late. I had my children late. So I was old school. I was that parent that my sons would say, please don't call Janine. You could call the cops, call the principal, but don't call her. Because I was very strict. I didn't care what, even when it came to things like hanging out with their friends or playing the video. First of all, I didn't buy the game. Their father brought the games, systems. Well, it's in my house. Guess what? We got rules. And they weren't allowed to play this game system throughout the week. They could play it on Friday, provided that they finished their homework, if they had homework over the weekend. But they couldn't spend 10 hours on the game. I limit them. And then if they wanted to play on Saturday, okay, you want to play the game for 3 hours? You got to give me an hour of something. 20 minutes outside, 25 minutes in a book, something. It wasn't just you just get to play the game all you wanted to. The other thing that I did was I took the phone. I restricted the phone. I restricted the game. I restricted where you can go. I didn't give my kids a lot of latitude because, first of all, I was raising boys and I was a single mom. I was raising boys. So I saw the struggles that my mother went through raising 3 boys. And I was in the middle of that. And I knew that there were things that I wanted my boys to know and to be aware of. And because I was strict and old school, they didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. But, you know, I just want to add this little piece. There's a thing called fear. And there's a thing called healthy fear. And I instilled in my children that I'm the law. I'm the ruler. I'm the master. I'm the king, the queen. I'm it. This is my bubble, and you're living in it. When you get your own bubble, you can do whatever you want. Excuse me. I didn't allow my children to watch TV every day and all night. During the week, school was the number one important thing in my household. And everything revolved around school. Certain things I didn't allow my children to do. First of all, I never used the word punishment in my house. It was called restriction. It wasn't called grounded. You're in restriction. You just can't do this, that, and the other. So when you're talking about what's happening in the world, I get that. But because we as adults and parents, we're doing so much outside of our children's lives that sometimes the children get left behind. And I run into that everywhere I go. I see children that I can tell that was left behind. Young lady, for example, yesterday, she's in front of Chipotle with a sign. She's asking for donations. Oh, baby girl, you just gave me an end. I got $2 in my hand and I walk over to her and I say, why are you out here doing this? And she began to tell me her story. So I said, so you were a tyrant at home? You know, so I'm always talking to them, finding out. And then I gave her information that she never received. Nobody ever talked to her about saving money. Nobody ever talked to her about having a plan A and a plan B, and just in case I have a plan C. So as parents and as adults, we're so busy doing our things that we miss some parts of the boat ride to give our children information. But it still starts at home.
Yeah, speaking of information, it sounds like you have quite a bit of information, and we're going to have to resume this conversation. Okay. I can tell that you absolutely need every bit of the 52 minutes that we can do with this show.
Sounds good.
So real quickly, let folks know how they can take advantage of your podcast on Facebook.
Okay. I'll spell my name. It's Janine, Janine. Last name is King, King. Just go to Facebook. I'm on Mondays live at 7 o'clock.
Okay. Monday at 7 o'clock. That's the place I need to be. And I'm going to log on and check you out. And then we're going to bring you back. And then we can dive into some of those needs and some of the solutions that you are able to bring to the table. Janine King, it's been an absolute pleasure. Madam J.
Yes,
and
thank you.
We'll pick this up soon.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
All right. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your best day. Peace.